What's up, everyone? Sam Shah here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. I'm excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm excited to have Walker on with me, and Walker is one of our students that we started working with about halfway through his junior year, December of junior year, and he is now a senior who just started his last year in college, and he just finished going through his full-time recruiting process. And so we wanted to get him on here today and talk to you guys a little bit about his journey, how he got to where he is today, and hopefully shed some insight for you guys that will help you with your own process as well. So Walker, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, man.
Yeah, of course.
And,
so happy to start.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I guess like before we dive into everything, if you can just maybe introduce yourself real quick so that people have a sense for who you are.
Yeah, happy to do that. So as Sam said, my name's Walker. I am a senior at Indiana University. I'm studying finance and business analytics. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Came to IU, had a strong business program, and kind of got interested in banking through school.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you go to IU, and I know IU is kind of a big banking school because you guys are famous for the investment banking workshop, and I think a lot of students there probably hear about banking that way. And my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but first of all, you're not in the investment banking workshop, right? But my understanding is that if you go to IU and you're in the investment banking workshop, then you're probably in pretty good shape. It's essentially like going to a target school and like they have a great placement rate into Wall Street, and they have a lot of alumni from the workshop that help you out and stuff like that. But if you go to IU and you're not in the banking workshop, then it's like a totally different story, right? It's almost like two different schools, basically, whether you're in the workshop or not. Is that kind of accurate? Like you being actually there, like what's your experience?
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say.
Got it. So like, would you say, are there a lot of people like you on campus who maybe weren't in the workshop but still get into banking, or would you say there's like very few and far in between?
I'd say it's pretty rare. Most of the people who aren't is some sort of diversity. That's usually how it goes, but maybe student athlete occasionally, but no, it's pretty rare to get a banking job not being in the workshop.
Got it. Okay. That's good to know. So let's just like start there, which is obviously, I don't know when you first decided that you wanted to get into investment banking. Was it freshman year or sophomore year or junior year? I know you came to us junior year, but I assume it was like probably before that, right?
Yeah, my freshman year, I joined a club called the Financial Services Club, and the club had a really strong emphasis on banking. So did some case competitions and really enjoyed it. Knew pretty quickly that I wanted to go into banking. My school also offers some specific investment banking classes, so took those as well. And you take one sophomore year that is part of the process to apply to the investment banking workshop.
Got it. So Financial Services Club is the one that everyone can join, and that's kind of like the first step if you want to be eligible for the IB workshop, basically.
Exactly.
And I think I had other IU clients tell me this before, but I'm trying to remember like the acceptance rate into the IB workshop is like really low, right? Isn't it like, do you know like how many people apply each year and how many people actually get in?
So I remember for us, the class was, so first of all, keep in mind that all the people who are applying to this, who are taking the class, are like pretty much top 10% of the business school, probably more like top 5. So the applicant pool is still extremely competitive. There were about 300 kids who started the class. I think we ended with like 120, and the workshop takes about 40 to 50. So if you can make it through the class, you have like a 45-50% chance. But once again, there's a lot of top candidates who take that up. There's diversity kids that fill some roles. So it is extremely competitive.
Got it. Okay. Wow. So 300 kids apply and they take 40 to 50 people every semester. Is that every year they take 40 or 50 people, or the entire club is 40 people?
It changes. Sometimes the workshop class will be bigger. Sometimes it'll be smaller. I think my year it's somewhere in the 50s, but they've taken more. They've taken less.
Got it. Okay. So you went through that process sophomore year. And then what happened was just like you went through the club recruiting process and just, did you like mess up on the interviews, or what do you think?
Yeah, so there's three components that make it up. So one, you have the class. They rank you in the class. The class I did pretty average in, not anything great, not like bad, but could have made it into the workshop based off that. You also have networking interviews where you talk to like upperclassmen, so juniors and seniors who are in the workshop. Those went really well, connected with people really well. The interviews were the part that messed me up. I was a sophomore. I had no clue really how to interview, and my behaviorals were just not there. My technicals lacked a little bit as well, but mainly just the behaviorals. I didn't have my stories down as well as other candidates did.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like basically, if you want to get into that workshop, and also for other students that are listening to this who maybe they're a freshman at IU and they're thinking about joining this workshop, you really have to almost prepare for the IB workshop recruiting process like you would the investment banking recruiting process. It's like exactly modeled the same way after what you had to do for banking recruiting, right? Except you kind of have to know it much earlier on. You have to be very polished even as an underclassman. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, that's completely fair to say.
Okay, cool. So regardless, like the majority of people, you didn't get into the club. There's no shame in that. It sounds like it's very, very, very hard. Then like that was sophomore year, right? So like what did you do then between sophomore year and kind of like halfway through junior year? There's like about a 1 year window there where you were trying to figure everything out on your own. Like talk to us about that process and what it was like.
Yeah. So initially after that, still knew I wanted to do banking. Still was committed to going to banking. A lot of the people I have a lot of friends who are in the IBW, so spoke with them. They were helpful. Applied for a lot of different positions as well as other people did, and got some interviews. Would get first rounds and wouldn't think they'd go bad, but would never be able to progress on to that second round. Just couldn't get there. Had good experiences. Got my technicals down, but I still think the behaviorals just weren't where they needed to be. And obviously, competitive application process. So just wasn't standing out. Wasn't really getting anywhere.
Okay, so you basically, since you're graduating in 2022, you started going through the summer 2021 recruiting process, and sounds like you were getting interviews, which is probably not easy to do considering you weren't part of the workshop, but nonetheless you got them. We just couldn't pass the interviews. Okay.
Yeah.
So then like what ultimately made you say like, let's say halfway through junior year, December was when you joined us, like what made you finally say, okay, I'm gonna, give this Wall Street mastermind thing a try? And also like what were some of the things you were considering at the time as you were making this decision on whether to join or not? Because I know like a lot of students, when they think about joining our program, especially if they were in your position where, maybe they tried recruiting on their own already and they weren't getting results, right? And maybe now, like by the time they're even considering us, they're a little bit late in the process, right? Because I mean, halfway through junior year, I think by then all the bulge bracket, elite boutiques, and even probably most of the middle market banks were done recruiting for summer 2021 already, right? So like, did you have any concerns or hesitancy in terms of like, hey, is this actually going to work for me? Because it's an investment to join this program, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great question. So definitely had a lot of hesitancy. Was worried first, just like if I was too late to the process, if I'd even be able to get in. Most people who were working, who are going to work in banking already had their offers, and even some regional boutiques had already done their recruiting. So the time was a really big factor. That was probably my biggest scare, because it's pretty unheard of to like get an investment banking internship only a couple months before it starts.
Right.
Usually the stuff is wrapped up in the year prior.
Right, right. So then, like, what ultimately made you? Because obviously we're here now, so you decided to join. So, like,
Yeah.
what ultimately helped you overcome that fear? I guess because I think it's a very legitimate one, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
probably a similar concern that a lot of other students might have if they were in your shoes and considering working with us. So, what was your thought process there?
Yeah. So I remember I spoke with you, and you were saying that like while the timing wasn't ideal, it was still very possible to get in. One of the things that I felt that I needed more of is my sophomore year internship was canceled because of COVID. So I wanted more professional experience, and you were extremely helpful, especially getting that initial first internship at a search fund. So that was really helpful. That helped boost up my professional experience. And then, so really, I think it came down to, I felt that I wanted to go into banking. This was my best option to keep having a chance. And so just committed to that.
Got it. Okay. When you said this was the best option, I imagine you probably looked at a lot of different things. Like there's so many resources out there now. You know, some are very cheap, some are more expensive. Like we're probably on the higher end, right? In terms of what we charge, but also obviously you kind of get what you pay for. But like what when you say this was the best option, like what makes you say that? Because
Yeah.
it's definitely not the cheapest option, but you said this was the best option. So like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, no, so definitely. So the modules were extremely helpful. For me, the most helpful was the behaviorals. So as any prospective client should know, basically there's all these modules and they go through how to network. I mean, they basically start you from the beginning. Like, so the networking aspect, which I felt pretty comfortable with, then they'll go through your behaviorals. There's a large document where you write down all your behavioral answers, and then Sam and his colleagues review it, provide feedback, and that's huge because behaviorals are what gets you a job. Those are obviously needed. And then there's also the technicals where you can learn through technicals in the accelerated process that Sam has. It's very effective. And then he also shows you how to answer questions and how he would answer questions efficiently. But in terms of those three, the behaviorals was the most important to me. I feel like that's really what got me my offer, was being able to structure out my stories in a concise way, and then have the resources to be able to get those reviewed by professionals in the industry.
Got it. So let's talk about that for a second, because I think like on the behavioral side, I mean, you might be a little bit unique, but a lot of the students, when they come into the program, we know this after having worked with, I think, 400 plus students now, right? Like most students feel like the behavioral interview is the part that they need the least help with, right?
Yeah.
We always get the most questions around like, oh, how do I learn technicals? Like, I don't understand these concepts, or, oh, I don't know how to network. Like, people aren't responding to me, or how do I get them to refer me? So there's always plenty of questions about those two things. Sounds like you still, found those to be helpful, but the most helpful part to you is the behaviorals. Can you help people understand like why is that, why did that make such a big difference? Because most people, they think like, well, behaviorals is easy, it's just talking about yourself, right?
Yeah.
I know how to do that, right? Or like, hey, tell me about a time when you did XYZ. Tell me about a time when you worked in a team. Tell me about a time you overcame a challenge. Like, okay, I have an example prepared for that, right? So like, tell me about yourself. Like, yeah, okay, I can introduce myself. Like, what is the big deal? like, why do you even need help for something like that? I mean, like,
Yeah. Yeah, so I understand exactly what you're saying. And initially, that's probably what I thought, especially when I first started recruiting, that my behaviorals were sound, that they sounded good, because you make them up, you think they sound good, the story makes sense to you, but you can always improve on those. And those are, in my opinion, the most important part of the interview process. Your technicals are kind of check the box. If you can answer them completely, like it doesn't really matter if you know everything or if you just can answer the question at a basic level. As long as you can get that, it's sort of a check the box. It's the behaviorals that are really important and that are what you need to focus on. And so specifically with Wall Street Mastermind, what helped me with the behaviorals is I would tell a story and then kind of not bring it full circle. And one of the things that we do in the interview guides is we tie it back to how this experience is relevant to banking. And that's huge. I mean, that makes your answer twice as good as it previously was, and really improves it. So I think that was a huge part for me.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I think one of the big reasons why a lot of people don't do that last part, which, like you said, makes the answer twice as good. I completely agree with you. Is that like, if I were to ask you, what is the most popular behavioral question framework that's taught out there, like what would you say? Like everybody knows this.
Star.
Yeah, STAR method, right? Like everybody has heard of STAR method. And the STAR method, I don't know how old it is. It's got to be 10, 20 years old at least. I don't know who started it, but it doesn't, the part that the STAR method is missing is that exact thing we just talked about, which is like tying it back and making it relevant to banking, right? People always stop at the R, which is like, here's the result of what I did, and then the end, right? And that
Yeah.
always felt incomplete to me. And so we teach our own framework, which we call the Spark framework, and then we kind of added that, additional element to it. And that's just one example of, I think, like a lot of people say, and by the way, we came up with this like Spark framework ourselves. I mean, not that I'm a genius or anything. It's just like, that's what I always did for my own interviews. I'm like, how come people aren't doing this? Um, but this is like, people always say like, well, like what could they possibly, show you that's different than everything else I can already find out there? Like, this is one example of that, right? It's like a lot of things that we teach in the program, we didn't get from like reading another interview guide and then just regurgitating it. It's like, we developed a system from being actual practitioners, like from actually helping so many students and identifying, the commonalities between answers that work versus answers that don't work. And it's that pattern recognition, which can only come from having a lot of experience doing this, right? And so I think like that I'm really glad you mentioned that, because and there are other frameworks. Like that's not the only framework you use to answer. You can't use that for every single behavioral question, but different questions require different frameworks. But I think the one thing that we're really big on, at least on the behavioral side, since we're talking about it, is giving you guys frameworks, not giving you guys like a script of like, hey, Walker, say these sentences or these words, and then you're going to get this job. Like everyone's answer is going to be different, but there is like a best practice in terms of how you structure your answer so that it's concise and it's coherent and everything you say is logical and also is like what the bankers want to hear or what they're looking for, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's good stuff. So like the behavioral stuff, I think it's the biggest trap, honestly, out of the entire recruiting process, because it's the one part that is the most it's the easiest for people to um, feel content about where they're at with their behaviorals, and it's the hardest for people to identify when something's actually wrong with their answers. Like with a technical interview, it's very obvious when you don't know something, right? Like if I ask you a technical question, you don't know the answer, you're like, okay, I got to study this, I'm going to go look this up. With the behaviorals, it's like you can practice your answers over and over and over again. It's going to sound good to you every time. And whatever is wrong with it might be in your blind spot, right? So you need like someone else to look at it, someone who's qualified, not just anybody, but someone who's qualified to look at it and point things out for you. And then, I mean, I don't know how you felt, but a lot of times our students tell us like, once we give them the feedback on the behavior, they're like, oh, wow, like that sounds so much better. Or, oh, wow, that was so obvious. How come I didn't think of that? And it's always one of those things where once you see it, then you can't unsee it. But until you see it, you'll never really see it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really I don't know. It's something that I always try to convey to people, but people it's hard for people to understand, I guess, until they actually really go through it themselves. So I guess like you went through the behavioral training. On the technical side, obviously you already have some training from probably going through the classes at school and prepping for the IB workshop and things like that. You mentioned that you were able to learn everything in a more accelerated way. Like, what does that mean? Like, why is it accelerated? And how is that different from like however you were going about it on your own previously? Like, aren't you just learning the same concepts? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. Yes. Happy to touch on that. So I'm sure most people who are watching this have heard of the 400 investment banking, the breaking into Wall Street, whatever guide. Everybody studies that. And that guide is good. I mean, like it has a lot of the questions that you're going to be asked, but it doesn't fully help you understand every question. So for example, it might walk you through how $10 of depreciation affects the three and financial statements, but it's not gonna help you really fully understand that. And once you can see it by the way Wall Street Mastermind does it, it just becomes a lot more clear, and you're fully understanding the concepts. So then you can apply it to other questions. So if you got asked, how does a $100 increase in debt affect the three financial statements? You're going to really know how that works instead of just having either a memorized answer or having no clue how to do that because it wasn't on the guide.
Got it. So essentially, when most people read the guides, they're just kind of reading, here's the question, here's the answer. And then there's 400 questions in this guide. So you got to go and memorize these 400 answers. And a lot of times when people do that, they might have the answer memorized by brute force, but they don't truly understand why the answer is what it is what you're saying.
Exactly.
And I think like the interesting thing about that is that used to work. Like these guides have been around for, I mean, I think since I was in college, or maybe it came out shortly after that. And I'm pretty old. I'm in my mid 30s, right? So for like at least the last 10 to 15 years. And I remember back in my days, if you had read like the Wall Street Guide or the 400 Questions Guide, like you were ahead of the curve. Like most people back in my days were reading the Vault Guide. Like nobody reads the Vault Guide anymore. It's like super basic and it's just not enough, right? And so back in the day, like that's what that's when everyone gradually started doing and catching on to. And then over the years, now it's like just like the de facto standard. Like everyone's doing it. If you join one of these workshops, that's probably what they have you read, right? All the other clubs on other campuses too, that's what they have you read. Like I had another student tell me like, oh, so for the IB club that I joined, I think he goes to the Northwestern or Chicago, I forgot. But like for their club, they actually have like quizzes based on the questions in those guides, right? But the problem is like once everyone starts doing it, then the interviewers will adapt, right? Because the interviewers figure out like, okay, these kids are all reading the same guides and okay, they've all memorized the same answers. So what they're going to do is they're going to stop asking you the exact same questions that are from those guides, right? Because what's the point? If that's all they're going to do, like they're not going to be able to distinguish who actually knows, these concepts versus people who are just kind of memorizing it by brute force, right? So what we're seeing more and more, and I don't know if this was your experience as well, but for a lot of our students, they tell us, people come back and share their interview questions into our internal database and whatnot, and you'll see like a lot of those questions. Yeah, some of them, maybe you still find the guys, but like more and more so nowadays, like a lot of these questions are like different, right? Not different concepts, but because there are only so many concepts you need to know, but the way they ask you the question is different, or they'll dress it up in a different way where if you are one of those guys or gals that are just memorizing these answers, you're probably not going to be able to answer these questions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we really try to, we don't even tell you guys to memorize any answers. We really try to like teach you the underlying concepts so that you truly understand it. And it's like anything else you learn. Like once you understand something, you have that aha moment, that light bulb moment that goes off. Like you don't even need to memorize it anymore. Because at that point, it just makes sense. Like when something clicks and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. And then like in the future, if it comes up again, like you already know how it works, right? And that's really how you ideally how you want to learn the technicals. And when you learn it that way, I don't think there's more than 20 to 30 hours of content, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what you actually need to know, right? You don't need to go through these like financial modeling courses that are 100+ hours or any of that stuff really, right? Or memorizing 400 questions. I don't know how many hours that takes, right? And you won't even get the question that you memorize. So that's great. I mean, so what happened then? Like, because by the time you came to us, it was so late. So obviously, I think you had a lot of urgency in terms of I got to find a junior summer internship, and I think the goal was always like, let's just get the best internship we can get that's still recruiting. And then you can always recruit again for full time if you decide to do that, right? And so, like, walk us through like kind of that junior summer internship recruiting process. Like, how did that end up for you, and what was that like?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So knew I still wanted to do banking. Got a search fund role, and that was really helpful. The principal was a ex banker, so he was very helpful, just providing advice and stuff like that. And then also through Wall Street Mastermind, got a spring investment banking internship at a small middle market bank in New York City. So that really helped. To put on my resume and just to learn, because now I had some prior investment banking internship experience, even though most of the summer internships were closed. Um, and knew I wanted to keep going into banking. So did full-time recruiting this last couple months, and received an offer last week. Yeah.
Got it. And so that investment banking internship in New York, you were doing that in the spring or in the summer or throughout the entire time, or?
It was in the spring, and I knew I liked the bank that I was at. I learned a lot. I knew that I had another opportunity at a hedge fund, and I knew that didn't want to be at that bank necessarily full time, which seemed almost unlikely at a point, because the bank was so small. I don't know if they were looking to hire somebody full time, but knew that I wanted to be in a bigger bank. Um, just with like an analyst class, I wasn't really going to have that there. So wanted to recruit for a bigger bank, but was always focused on banking, even though I did work for a hedge fund this past summer.
Got it. Okay, so you did the banking internship for the spring, then you worked at a hedge fund in the summer, and then at the end of the summer at the hedge fund, then you went through the full-time recruiting process, which typically starts up in around like early August,
Yeah.
right? Okay, got it. And then so was the full-time recruiting process, would you say like easier or harder than the junior summer internship process? Like, what do you think?
So I think in general it's probably harder, but for me personally, it was easier. I felt a lot more prepared.
Hmm.
The technicals were definitely more difficult, but I still didn't have a huge problem with them. Got a lot of first rounds, and then made it to a lot of second rounds and super days. When you get to super days, there's a lot of different factors. Obviously, they know they're going to make mistakes. You're going to make like a mistake or something. So had a lot of different super days, but eventually landed one for an offer, and couldn't be happier to be working there after graduation.
Got it. And like, what type of bank is it that you're going to be going to? Is it?
Yeah, middle market healthcare.
Okay, got it. Um, and so is that like, are you pretty happy with that? Like, is that what you want to do? Like, how was that outcome ultimately relative to your expectations coming into this program? Because obviously, you probably have some expectations for like what you were hoping to accomplish out of this program, right?
Yeah, so I knew pretty quickly, even when I just started IB, elite boutiques were never my goal. Didn't ever really even like have a desire to work at elite boutique. Bulges, I think there's pros and cons, but I was always more focused on the middle market. So the opportunity to work in a middle market is great. And my spring internship in banking was in healthcare. That was kind of random. I didn't like have any specific interest or anything, and that's just the group that hired me. But really liked healthcare, and so was looking for healthcare opportunities. And so the opportunity to work in a middle market bank in healthcare is obviously very appealing to me.
Right, right. Okay, sounds like it's really a great fit then. So that's awesome. I guess before we kind of finish up here, like I always end with this question, which is like, now that you're on the other side and you've gotten this offer that you've been working towards since freshman year, so it's been like 3 years almost, right? It's been a long journey. Um, for those of for those people who are listening to this right now, maybe they even go to the same school as you, maybe they go to IU, or maybe they don't, but like maybe they're in a similar spot as you. They maybe like didn't get into whatever feeder club on campus. Maybe they're a little bit, or maybe they're a little bit late to the process, right? Whatever. Like, what do you have like a piece of advice? It could be anything. Maybe it's something that someone told you when you were recruiting that just like really helped you tremendously or made your life a lot easier. Like anything like that that you want to pass down to our listeners so that, they can kind of benefit from it as well?
Yeah. So I have two pieces of advice. The first one's something that I think a lot of people don't do, but I would recommend to do it, especially if you thought that either your interview went well and maybe it was just really competitive, or you messed up on one little part, but it still overall went well. Is after interviews, if I received an email that I didn't advance to the next round, I would always follow up with my interviewers and ask them how I could improve. I can't stress that enough. I would say be as honest as you can. I'm not going to take this like personally. It's not gonna hurt me. I really want to know how I can improve. And a lot, I'd say like 75% of bankers would follow up, because they want to help. I mean, most of these guys are very nice people. They want to help you, and I got a lot of great advice from that. So I think that's really big. And then the second one, this is especially important if you are starting late, like kind of how I did. Really, like just don't give up. There were a lot of times when I knew I was like, is this worth it? Like, do I just want to go to another field? But push myself to stay recruiting for banking, and obviously it worked out. And so feel very very happy as to where I am.
I mean, a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, on that second point about not giving up, um, it's probably that much sweeter
Yeah,
that you're
exactly.
here because you had to go through so many obstacles and so many setbacks and maybe what was perceived as failure at the time, whether it's like when you applied to IBW and didn't get in, or when you went through like the summer 2021 recruiting process with all these bulges and middle market banks and you didn't get an offer. Like there's so many setbacks along the way, but to overcome all of that and triumph at the end is like that journey is what makes all of this even just that much sweeter, right? And so a lot of times we tell people like you're 3 feet away from gold, and you've been digging like all this time, and you dug this crazy deep tunnel, and it's like right on the other side of the wall, and then you give up and you turn back, and because you can't see that it's like right in front of you, right? And if you
Exactly.
just like you just gotta keep falling forward and like maybe it's like if you fall one more time, you're gonna cross the finish line, right? And so a lot of times I feel like with banking recruiting, it's also just a competition in terms of who's able to be the most resilient and who's able to last the longest and
Yeah.
just not quit, right? And of course, like I'm not saying like, hey, if something's not working for you, just keep doing the exact same thing you've been doing, and then like everything will work itself out. Like that's not what I'm saying. Like you have to like figure out what you're doing wrong. And I think that's a good segue into your first piece of advice, which is always asking for feedback. And I actually think, dude, 75% response rate, like that's that's phenomenal because we always tell all of our students to ask for feedback, um, but I don't think I've ever heard like that high of a response rate. So I think like the way you're going about it, like um, you're probably doing something right. I'm gonna ask you for your script so I can share with other people. but no, like you gotta ask for feedback, right? In all seriousness, and like whether it's from your interviewers or like getting a mentor, getting a coach, having someone who can actually give you actionable feedback and constructive feedback so that you can actually improve the way you're doing things. That's what I mean by falling forward. Like just falling down alone, like there's nothing to be proud of. But like if you're falling forward, then every setback or every failure, I put that in quotes, becomes just a learning opportunity, right? It puts you one step closer to the outcome that you're looking for. I think there's like a really one of my favorite sayings is just like a setback is just a setup for a comeback, right? Which is but only if you have the right approach, right? And so I think that's really really great advice, man. So look, guys, like if you're listening to this, maybe you're going through the recruiting process right now. Maybe you've already had some setbacks on your own, and you're trying to figure out like what the heck am I doing wrong, or how exactly am I supposed to go about this, or you don't know why you're stuck. Then like don't be ashamed to reach out and get help. Like there are a lot of different places you can get help from. Us being one of them. Like it doesn't have to be us, but if you want it to be us, what I would encourage you to do is actually you can first reach out and talk to one of our alumni first. Okay, that's what we're doing now is we're letting people actually just schedule these free virtual coffee chats with alumni who have already gone through our program. These are upperclassmen who have already successfully recruited, and they successfully come out the other side and they've gotten an offer, right? So they were in your shoes not that long ago, and they'll talk to you about like whatever you want. You can ask them for recruiting advice. You can ask them about Wall Street Mastermind if you want to, or you don't have to, but like you can just talk to them. It's a free networking opportunity. And then of course, like after you talk to them, if you feel like, hey, like this sounds interesting and I still want to talk to Wall Street Mastermind and maybe they can help me too, then great. Like we're here, happy to talk to you. If you talk to them and you're like, no, I don't want to do Wall Street Mastermind, hey, no worries. Like hopefully you still get something from the call, right? And so you got nothing to lose. If that's something that you're interested in, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The URL is abbreviated to, the streets abbreviated to ST. So it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And you'll be able to book this free virtual coffee chat. And we'll be happy to talk to you and hopefully help you out a little bit on this very, very competitive and difficult process. All right. So with that said, Walker, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk to us today. Also, of course, I want to congratulate you again on getting an offer that you're really happy with. And it's been really fun working with you. I'm glad we were able to play a small part in your success. And obviously, you know, you deserve most of the credit for actually putting in the work. So can't wait to see, you know, what else is ahead of you and all the success that you're going to have. But, you know, please don't be a stranger. Just like, you know, you're part of the family. And hopefully, you know, we'll continue to help you out with whatever you need in the future. And you can also help other people out in the community as well. So.
Of course. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, that'll be it for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this interview. We'll be back with more of these for you guys again in the near future. And we'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye.